David Schlum. This is Mark Whistler, my business partner. We're co-founders of Added Innovation. Hey, Don. We are a technology company here in Springfield, Missouri. We work out of the E-Factory downtown. I see a lot of friendly faces from down at the E-Factory, so we really appreciate all the support from the E-Factory members. We are a founding member of SGF Devs, so yeah. Thanks so much for putting this on. This is really a proud moment to see this happening. One of the former presidents of the .NET user group many years ago, and so to see all the progression where we've come in the community is just fantastic. So Added Innovation is a company that we do custom .NET development. We do Azure-based hosting, so a lot of things that Randy's going to talk about today is really pertinent. A lot of similar things that we do in our business, as well as we do a lot of low-code software development. Many people haven't heard of that. We're just talking about that. It's sort of this up-and-coming software development methodology out there that I encourage you to take a look at. Things like the Microsoft Power Platform, OutSystems, Mendix, things like that. So a lot of the very large enterprise organizations are going to that to significantly speed up development. A couple years ago, Hack for Good won Hack for Good using the OutSystems platform in low code and for the Borrow My Angel organization. So really proud of that, and we're really happy to be here. And Mark, you want to introduce Randy?
Yeah, thanks, David. We're really proud to be a part of the SGF community. In fact, all of Added Innovation has been a byproduct of this technical community, and we have all come out of this and has made Added Innovation what it is today. And I think it's really important that we take our time and our talent and our resources and we invest that back in each other as well as this community. And so we're excited to bring Randy to the stage today because he embodies a lot of the values that we as Added Innovation believe in. In fact, David, we were just talking to him backstage, and I feel like we could probably bring him on as an employee. Yeah, so I'm not sure we can afford him, but currently Randy is the Director of Azure Architecture here on the screen here at TriZetto, and which is a division, a healthcare division of Cognizant, and we're gonna let him talk about Azure Data Warehouse with the Synapse, and if we have time, I think we'll maybe crush some SQL scripts and things of that nature. So it'll be a good time for all of the data nerds out there. I know there's a data nerd right here, so this is going to be great. So let's take a nice SGF warm welcome for Randy, who is, by the way, considered and calls himself the salty Asian and considers himself, or the salty Korean, is that right?
Yes.
And is a self-proclaimed ping pong master, Mr. Randy Walker. Let's do it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Randy Walker. I work for TriZetto. We are a healthcare division of Cognizant. Cognizant's 280,000 employees. It's a big company. But fortunately, TriZetto, we're actually pretty small. So pretty much half of everybody that's in this room, if you have health insurance, we've actually helped process your claims at some point in time. So as you guys know, I am the Azure Director. I'm the only Azure person at TriZetto, not the only Azure person at Cognizant, but within our division, I'm the only special Azure designated person that deals with Azure on a regular basis, on an everyday basis. And so we've done a lift and shift. And so I've done a lot in Azure, have a lot of experience. And so one of the topics we are going to talk about is Synapse, what used to be called Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And that's one of the areas that I had a lot of experience in. Formerly, I was the owner of a company based out of Northwest Arkansas that dealt a lot with Walmart vendors. And so we had a lot of big data. And so that's where I came to know Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So I did promise some guys I was talking to yesterday that I was going to show some statistics. So I put up some various information there. But I wanted to show you a few statistics. So here at TriZetto, this is the big number here. So right now we have, I did a quick report last night. it says we have 57,000 VMs in just our little healthcare division, okay? But I can tell you right now, I know that we have at least 1,070 VMs in production that I deal with on a regular basis that I have to make sure are up and running at all times. And then, now I did not put any numbers beside this, but this is our Azure consumption graph. So the red line is our production. So that's our Azure cost. And unfortunately, I can't give you the numbers, but you can imagine we are actually the third largest, supposedly I was told we are the third largest consumer of Azure spend out of all of Microsoft's customers. So hopefully that puts things into a little bit of perspective. So I know that in my description I said if we have time, we'll get to SQL tips. I figured we're going to smash it in right at the beginning, real quick, okay? So there's only a few slides, which makes it great and easy. Okay, so I decided to do nothing online. I apologize, but for the sake of time and the ease, I just wanted to show you the code. And so unfortunately, I'm just not going to show you anything online. There's always problems when I present, if my connection's good or not. So I just decided this is probably the best way to do it. All right, so within SQL Management Studio, as always, you have a begin, and with every begin, you must have an end, okay? So this is what I always recommend. Start off with your scripting. You have your try and end, and then your catch block, okay? So this is how I always recommend to start your SQL scripting. Now, you also want to begin a transaction and commit a transaction. So here's where my tips come in. So this is pretty normal. Not a whole lot of people know this, but for the most part, if you've dealt with SQL Server, this is just a great, easy way to start your script out. Now, the next little bit, so what I do is I add this when I'm starting a script. Select 1 divided by 0. Now, what's going to happen? Anybody? Divide by 0 error, exactly. And so why do I want this? Because as I'm testing my script out, I want it to start this transaction, get a divide by 0, and then when it comes back to this catch block, it's going to catch the error, and then it's going to roll the transaction back. So right from the beginning, I've got my great framework for my SQL scripting, okay? And so moving on, but it doesn't really do me any good if I don't know what the error is, right? So if I've got an error in my SQL scripting, I want to actually know what's going on. So now, this is what I recommend. If you're going to take a picture of this, because this is highly useful, okay? So I'll leave it up for a second. But this will give you the information as far as like the error number, error severity, state, procedure, the line, and most importantly, your actual message, okay? So normally, here's where I have the insert. This is where you're going to do all your little code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? All right, so that's pretty much it. That's my SQL scripting tips, okay? So I tried to smash that in there real quick. Normally, I go through a whole lot more stuff, but we're going to leave it there for now. All right, so we're going to actually talk about Azure Synapse, and interestingly enough, it's actually Azure Synapse Analytics. Okay, so you're going to see Azure Synapse Analytics, and you're going to see SQL Data Warehouse, and all of these slides, for the most part, have originated from Microsoft at some point. There are some that are my slides, but I've kind of hodgepodged them all. So I originally started with Azure SQL Data Warehouse when it was in private preview, hit public preview, and I was working with a lot of customers, clients, customers like PepsiCo, which they have tons and tons of data. And so that's why I started out with Azure SQL Data Warehouse to be able to manage all this data. All right. So the origins of Azure SQL Data Warehouse, Azure Synapse, is actually an appliance called PDW, or Parallel Data Warehouse. So if anybody ever tells you that data warehouse is new, it's not. It's actually been around a long time. It used to be it didn't look like a server like that. I've actually seen one. It's just a big, huge box in a server rack that you can install. So that what they would do is they would give you the hardware for free, but you had to pay for the SQL Server license, which was naturally in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, but it's been around for quite a while. And so I was fortunate to get some help when I was working with it with someone who had PDW experience. And so that's how I actually learned a lot of these tips and tricks that I'm going to show you, hopefully, at the end of the deck. All right, so quick glance. So it is considered a PaaS service. It will handle petabytes of information. Now, formally, Microsoft tells you that it handles 4 petabytes of data, okay? So it will handle 4 petabytes of information. Now, I will tell you offline that is actually, it will handle, that's the minimum, all right, that it will handle. So it will actually handle more. I'm not sure of the actual max anymore. Haven't talked with the team lately. But I know that at some point they're trying to target somewhere around 64, 128 petabytes of information. So you can tell the scale that this will actually operate on. But even if you're not dealing in petabytes and you're just dealing in terabytes, it's going to aptly handle the data that you want it to. All right. So we're going to talk about some of the other stuff like column store, Polybase, and of course, the last one is a lie. It's, the PDW still exists. It's still out there in the wild. So, all right. So, Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So you can tell. If it says SQL Data Warehouse, that means I got these slides from a while back. All right. If it says Synapse, that means they're brand new slides I literally got within the last month. All right. So, Synapse compares to Teradata. They also compete with Pure Data as well as AWS Redshift, okay? And so this one's a little different because they actually try and compare price to performance, all right? I do want to make very, very clear. So there's, we've all heard the acronym big data, right? So Synapse is not particularly meant for big data. It is and it's not, okay? Where it comes into play is when you have relational data, okay? Its foundation came from SQL Server, all right? It was actually a third party. A bunch of guys got together and said, hey, we can actually get SQL Server to scale. If you remember way back in the day, SQL Server couldn't even handle hardly, 50 gigs was like, oh my gosh, it'll never do that, right? You ended up having to go to Oracle to handle data sizes like that. So a bunch of guys got together. So that's what this is a result of. You still want relational data in Synapse or a SQL data warehouse, okay? If you want to deal with big data, which is, not structured or semi-structured data, then, you definitely want to go with an alternative solution, Hadoop, Spark, something of that nature, all right? All right. So where the difference between Synapse and SQL Server is that, okay, so within data warehouse, you have, it's meant to be archival. It's, so it's not meant to be transactional. So what that means is like, if you're trying to insert a particular row, no. Data warehouse is not meant for that, okay? Do not use it for that. You want to use SQL Server. If you're inserting and deleting a few rows or, a bunch, even hundreds of rows or thousands of rows, that's not what data warehouse is meant for. You want to be dealing with tens or 100,000s of rows when you're dealing with Synapse, all right? So one of the things that blew my mind when I started working with it is there are absolutely no keys in Synapse data warehouse, okay? So you have no primary keys and you have no foreign keys. Does that blow anybody's mind? Yeah, I'm seeing some nods. It should, all right? Well, why do they do this? They do this because 100% performance, okay? They wanted to get rid of the keys for performance reasons. So what that means is that you actually have to make sure you have clean data going in, all right? And therefore your reporting will be clean coming out, all right? So if you want referential integrity, then go with SQL Server because Data Warehouse doesn't have that, all right? They are trying to work on that, but last I heard, it hasn't been implemented. All right, so MPP, you're going to hear this acronym several times. MPP stands for Massive Parallel Processing, okay? So Data Warehouse is Massive Parallel Processing. That, in other words, it's processing things in parallel, okay? Whereas SQL Server does not do that, all right? SQL Server is meant for simple processing. Data Warehouse Synapse is meant for, massive parallel processing. All right. It's going to be interesting. So there's a control node that handles scaling, all right? You actually control how it scales, how much you pay for the service. And so the control node helps handle the movement of the data, stuff like that. So in other words, the SQL Server plans, what gets executed, how it gets executed, can be very complex. With SQL Server, they're very simple, okay? You can actually get a nice visual representation in SQL Server. In Data Warehouse, you can't. You can only get this big, huge text, and I'm going to show it to you later, hopefully. All right, but we do have to hurry. All right, so the one funny thing, though, is I love this slide because it's so wrong. So this is a Microsoft slide, and it says, limitless scale provides a breathtaking view of your data. Isn't that a nice marketing little thing? Yeah, that's so wrong. It is not limitless. It is very limited at some point. Nothing in the world is ever limitless, right? So it is limited at some point. So their current, here's a ton of their customers. I threw this in there just so you would kind of get a feel. People are using it. All right. So I like this particular picture because it's a great, it's a good conceptual understanding, all right, of how Synapse Analytics works, all right, in conjunction with Power BI, Azure ML, machine learning. And so the ecosystem up here is basically, think of it as your data. So your data comes into Azure Synapse and then can get consumed by Power BI or by ML. Now, there's other ways to consume it. I have gotten it to work with Excel, Access, the normal methods that you would possibly consume data. It will work in those methods because behind the scenes, it is still SQL Server, all right? There are some caveats to that, though, and you want to be careful of that. And talk to me afterwards, and we'll go through some of those caveats. All right, so this is a really great, another good conceptual overview of, actually, let's go back here for a second. So Synapse is okay, so when they made the name change from Parallel Data, Azure SQL Data Warehouse to Synapse, we thought it was going to be just a name change, right? Well, it's not, okay? So they're actually trying to make it a platform, okay? And they have, okay? But we are only going to talk about one particular piece. But foundationally, no matter what, as with pretty much anything in Azure, the base layer is storage, okay? Storage is the base layer for everything in Azure, all right? Now, yet again, this is incorrect. So while it says Azure Data Lake Storage, it does not have to be Data Lake Storage. It can be Blob Storage if you'd like it, regular Azure Blob Storage. And in fact, just so you know, I recently did a comparison. Data Lake Storage is actually more expensive than Blob Storage. So be careful, all right? You don't always have to just throw things in Azure Data Lake for storage, okay? All right. So this kind of gives you a great overview they really do have a platform, all right? And as a platform, therefore, they want you to be able to use SQL, Python, .NET, Java, Scala, and R, So they are really trying to make it into a platform. But we are only going to focus on this part right here, the SQL, okay? So when they're going to slowly start talking about the platform as a whole. So be careful if you start to look into things. It's not just the SQL piece, okay? All right. And of course, right here is the Synapse Analytics Studio. It's not just Synapse. It also works with Databricks as well. So they're getting very confusing. Yet again, Microsoft is with their marketing of Azure. It's getting very confusing. So just so you know, this Analytics Studio doesn't just apply to Synapse. It applies to a lot of their products. So, all right. So the main three particular pieces, and I wanted to show you because there are three different ways. There's Data Factory, Databricks, and then Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And they all go back to, again, not just data lake storage, but storage in general. They all access it separately. And so notice Data Warehouse is a separate piece. So Data Warehouse may or may not fit your needs. We're going to talk about that a little bit. But just be aware that it's only one part of the big data solution that Azure has, okay? All right. So the goal here is that from left to right, you've got all of this information. They want you to ingest it through Data Factory, and then any one of these, technically, Data Factory, Databricks, or Data Warehouse, will access the storage. And then through all that, you can report, do more advanced analytics, and including real-time analytics. All right. So, but I really actually prefer this particular diagram a little bit better, because even though it's pretty darn accurate, it's not 100%. Because all of this data, which is something that I did quite a bit, a lot of logs, a lot of files, but it didn't go through Data Factory, it went directly to Blob Storage. Notice it's not just data lake storage, right? So from the data lake storage, it can go into your data warehouse, as well as, there's other third party that data warehouse can also ingest as well. But there's alternative ways it can go to Databricks from Blob and et cetera. But one of the most popular things to also do is actually have Azure Analysis Services prep all the data before Power BI actually consumes it, okay? So I really actually like this. There's just a couple little things that aren't quite as accurate. All right. So again, we're going to focus on the SQL piece. So the functionality, so you have, so as far as what they consider storage, you have column store indexes. You can do table partitions, which is extremely important for your performance, all right? You can do distributed tables, materialized views, which I'll be honest, I'm not as familiar. The materialized views is rather new. Non-clustered indexes, result set caching. It is, again, it's SQL Server, so you can use your Transact SQL language skills that you already have directly here, all right? We're not going to go through all this. There is the regular object models, so tables, views, sprocs, as well as functions, okay? But there's a lot of caveats to store procedures and functions. All right, so they are on their Gen 2 improvement. So originally Gen 1 was good. It was actually pretty decent, but they've optimized it so it's got like 4 times the performance. Actually 4 times the concurrent performance. So you can now run 128 concurrent queries at the same time. You used to be limited in how many concurrent queries you could do. 5 times faster. Prices really didn't get any cheaper, I don't believe, but the price per performance went up. So you can read through the rest. So this is kind of the next wave of this, the current status, as well as the next wave of what they anticipate. So you've got your provision compute, serialized views, which your workload importance. So a particular note, oops, let's go back here. You've got your workload isolation, which is under preview. And that actually goes with, down here, the very bottom one, private endpoints. So this is something that I have to deal with on a regular basis because I deal with HIPAA compliance, high trust compliance data. And so if you need isolated data, they are working on that. So right now it's just, it's on shared compute. It's not officially publicly accessible, but they're working on ways to more privatize the data. All right. See me if you have questions about that, because it is a very important piece of Azure and data warehouse. They're making massive improvements in this whole private endpoint, working with network security groups, et cetera. They are working on direct Power BI integration. Power BI already works with it. I'll tell you that right now. ML integration, data lake exploration, streaming analytics, Spark integration. So all this stuff is under preview, but some of it already works. I think what they're trying to do is improve the actual integration, the direct integration with it. All right, so these are the different regions that it's currently available in. They may have added a couple more, but for the most part, actually put this up here because in my Azure 101 talk, I always tell you, be careful where you provision. You know, you do not want to provision anything in a country outside of what you're used to, all right? Naturally, if you provision a resource outside of the US, you have to comply by the rules of that country. So if you, so let's say West Europe, you have to comply by the EU, okay? And particularly, what is it, the GDPR stuff that they've just implemented. So be careful where you implement stuff, always. All right, well, I keep hitting the wrong button, sorry. All right, so how does Synapse Analytics work? All right, so this is one of the better representations that they've given me on how it actually functions. So on the bottom here, we have, it says remote storage. It is, and it's not. It's basically Azure's storage, right? So you can be data lake storage, blob storage, whatever you want. So in this particular case, though, they are using blob storage to ingest the data. And so what happens is, as you scale Azure SQL Data Warehouse up, so for every 100 PD or DWU, I'm sorry, it's called Data Warehouse Units. It stands for DWU. And so for every DWU, you get one more of these. So this is 300, DWU 300, because there's 3 compute pieces, three virtual computers, okay? We'll just call them virtual machines, for lack of a better term, actually working. So that would be 300 DWU. So each DWU has its own core, virtual CPU core. It has its memory. It has its own storage, all right? It also has cache and a temp DB, all right? Now, what it does is each core accesses the data separately, all right? And so where the MPP, massive parallel processing, comes into play is each core is accessing the data, a separate piece of the data, all right? And it's processing a separate piece of the data with every core, all right, with every VM. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay, All right, so we're going to move on. This one is I like this one as well, because in reality, you actually have what's called a control node, and each one of these compute nodes accesses the storage separately, all right? So this is how the performance scales, all right? This is how it's able to access petabytes of information super fast, all right? All right, so how fast? Well, blazing fast, right? At least that's what Microsoft likes to say. So up to 100 times faster queries. They like to say 15 times more compression based off of the column store indexing. Column store indexing is key and critical to the performance as well, all right? So not only do you have the virtual cores and VMs individually accessing the data, you also want to make sure and use clustered column store indexes, all right? And so you can kind of see the parallel execution of how it works, this one being the control node, all right? All right, let's move on. All right, so if you want to know more about column store tables, how column store indexing works, this is the slide for you. I'm not going to go over it. It's really deep, really technical. Sometimes I get bogged down in the details of it and don't even fully understand it myself because I am not a DBA. So, but if you'd like a copy of the slide, let me know, and I can definitely get it to you. And I hit the wrong button. There we go. All right. What I do know is distributions and partitions. Partitioning is extremely, extremely, extremely important. Why is it important? Because remember all of these control nodes, right? So all of these nodes here, they're accessing different pieces of information. Well, you're helping it determine that information by partitioning it, okay? So in my particular case, I did it by date, all right? There's lots of ways you can do it. I have another slide here in a second I'll show you on different ways. But basically what it does is think of like actually storing separate files. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to partition your data and you're going to store the data in separate files. That way, the control nodes can access the individual files separately, right? / your partitions. And so it knows how it's distributed. So it knows how the data is distributed. So not only are these VMs accessing the data separately, but you're helping it out with the different partitions, okay? So that is extremely critical to basically getting that performance, like they were saying, like 10 times performance. That's how you get it. You're basically multiplying your performance with partitioning, all right? Okay, so here is like those kind of common table types of distribution methods. So let's see, I can't even, actually this may not be the right slide that I'm, no, actually it's not here. But anyway, we usually, all right, so sorry, I got caught up here for a second. So you have fact data, and so fact data is usually how you actually want to partition your data. So it's, yeah, actually, let me skip over this because I don't quite remember why I added that one. All right, so different ways to actually access Synapse. There are 5 different ways. 3 of them I've actually used myself. So remember when I said there's a platform? So this is kind of what they mean as a platform. So you have this analytics piece, and then you also have this Azure Data Studio. So they're trying to provide this platform and plethora of ways of accessing the data, all right? Now, these are the 3 ways that I've done it: Visual Studio Code, SSMS, and SSDT, all right? So I don't necessarily recommend Visual Studio Code. SSMS and SSDT are the ways that I recommend. And, but I will tell you, SSDT within Visual Studio itself has a lot of excess crap in it. So whenever you run a query, whenever you run a select statement, it's going to basically take a lot longer, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff in the background. And so I worked directly with the team. I was wondering what the heck's going on? Why is this taking longer in Visual Studio than it is in SSMS? But the funny thing is, even though it runs slower in SSDT, SSDT gets the updates faster than SSMS does. So just keep that in mind. Whenever you want a new feature of something in SQL or something like that, you want to look something up, SSDT gets it before SSMS does, okay? That's across the board. That's including with SQL Server as well, okay? All right. All right, Polybase. So Polybase, so we're just going to talk briefly about it. You can tell this one's really old because it talks about PDW and Polybase being in the middle. So Polybase can actually work with Hadoop and Hadoop file, well, mainly Hadoop files. And I love Polybase. If you haven't used Polybase yet, Polybase is the most fabulous feature I think they've added to SQL Server in I couldn't tell you when. If you've used SSIS, screw it. It sucks. Okay, Polybase is the way to go. But I will tell you that you have to have well-formed text files, okay? That's the only thing. So it deals with text files, but it is far and above, it is the best way to do anything. All right, so it's better than BCC, bulk copy, SSIS, and the reason is because it's multi-threaded, all right? So much like how you have the different compute nodes in in Synapse, Polybase works the exact same way, all right? It also has error handling, so which is great, right? It's not fabulous. You can only really tell it how many errors you want it to handle. So if it hits a few rows where where it can't interpret what that line is, then it's going to error out. But you can ignore those. I love it, and I literally did test on this. If you gzip your text files, it runs even faster, okay? Now, it runs even faster, again, if you put it in premium storage. So you've got regular Blob Storage, which runs on spindle disks. If you run in premium storage, it's running on SSD. So it runs even faster, all right? And then one of the caveats is that you cannot have ANSI files, ANSI text files. They must be UTF-8 or UTF-16 encoded, okay? All right. Let's see here. There's one other thing I wanted to say, but we'll get to that hopefully. All right, so here's some code. I know it's hard to read, but this is the code that you need to set up Polybase. If you want, ask me. I'll give you these slides later. I'm happy to hand these over. Really, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 to set up Polybase, okay? And, the crazy thing is, okay, so then what you do is you have all these files. Let's say you have 1,000 files. You stored them all within Blob Storage under one folder, right? Well, what you do is you define what all those files look like. All 1,000 files. It all looks like this. So in my case, when I was dealing with Walmart data, Walmart week, item number, there's a blank, store number, sales type, sales, and quantity. And then I gave it a location. Where is it in Blob Storage? And what can I do with that stuff? I can do a select statement on it. I can run regular SQL select statements directly against text files. Isn't that amazing? I don't know. I mean, it's pretty cool. Once you actually start using it, if you ever have a need for importing any data, or you just need to quickly look at 1,000 files, and you don't have time to go through it. So let's say IS logs, if we've all had at some point to probably have to look at an IIS log, right? Well, you can just throw them all in there, define what they look like, and look for those exceptions, okay? So that's what's so amazing about Polybase. Literally, I think I had like over 150 gigs, and it took less than a minute and 6 seconds to look through all that data. Like, it's freaking amazing, okay? So I highly recommend it. All right. The one thing about, sorry, here we go. The one thing, well, if I hit the right button. The one thing about Synapse, they recommend that you actually do what's called CTAS, create table as select. So whenever you have your Polybase tables, right, then what you're going to do is you're going to import all that data doing a create table as select. And then you're going to tell it, some of this stuff has been deprecated. You no longer have to tell it to create a custom column store index, but you do have to tell it the distribution. What am I distributing? How am I distributing the data, okay? And so you give it, in my case, I'm doing it by item number. And so as select, and then I'm selecting all this data from my Polybase table, okay? Because if you notice down here, that for me, that was my Polybase table. Now, what gets crazy cool is, let's see here, is once you start partitioning that data, okay? So you can actually, cluster column store data, or cluster column store index, so you do the index, you do the distribution, but you can actually create a partition as well. So, and in this case, I'm partitioning it by Walmart week, okay? And so here I'm listing out every particular partition, okay? So it's yet another way to segregate your data and get even more and more performance, as we talked about earlier. All right, so I want to go back here for a second, and let's see. Now, here, let's just move forward. All right, so remember how I said that there is, oops, let's go back here. I don't know if I can, it's not letting me, I'd hoped it was going to let me scroll. This is the explain plan. If you notice, like this scroll bar here, it's super, you can tell how long this one is. It's a huge explain plan. So remember I said that, SQL Server, regular SQL Server explain plans are really easy. This is really complex. So it's basically, the controlled node is telling everything what it's supposed to do. And it gives you a text information of how it does this, okay? And in my particular case, I was having a particular problem. And so whenever you see this right here, it says broadcast move. What it's meaning is it's moving all of that data from, let's say I'm at DWU 1000. So that means I have 10 different compute nodes, right? It's moving all that data from all 10 compute nodes, moving all that data back to just one compute node. And that one compute node's doing all the processing. So this is why explain plans are extremely important. You want to make sure that you're getting all the performance that you can out of it. And so broadcast move is your nemesis, all right? To be honest and to be fair, I will tell you right now, I scrapped a very, very expensive project that personally cost me tens of thousands of dollars, all because of this one explain plan and all the broadcast moves it was doing, okay? So it literally killed my performance, and I couldn't get it to recover. There's no way that I could get it to improve. So that's why. All right, so here's some of the bad stuff. We talked about SSDT. There's extra stuff in it. SSMS, there's no stuff in it. It's better, but you don't get the updates as quickly as SSDT does. Summary tables are actually still a good thing. Sadly, now they won't want to tell you you don't have to, but I tested it. you just need to build summary tables. And you're not going to get away from it at times. So during your nightly processes or as you're importing your data, you just have to just remember to do your aggregations, all right? I recommend that you still join on one column, okay? Nobody likes to do that, really, right? You expect in SQL Server that you can join on multiple columns. You still can, but I don't recommend it, all right? And how you can get away with this is by using hash columns. Now, talk to me later, and I can give you some of that code on how to build hash columns. But basically, what you can do is take all your primary key information and create a hash column out of that. So it keeps it small, and then you're only joining the two hash columns based off the hash columns. All right. So user-defined functions. So remember I said that there is a caveat to that. You can only have scalar user-defined functions, period. They're no deterministic. So things that like well, let me think here. Off the top of my head, I can't think of an example. I was able to get them to add in dates because dates are important, right? So, so just remember, and I'm sorry, this is incorrect. So it's not, I can't remember, I believe it's scalar, but scalar and dates work. I think deterministic does not. So I apologize I need to update that. At the time, when I was working with it, they did not have Entity Framework support. So you may check, they may have it now, but it was not originally designed for Entity Framework. Excel, there's a little line, whenever you connect to it in Excel, you have to make sure persist security information's off, and you cannot do cross-database joins, all right? So that shouldn't be a problem for most people, but sometimes you may need, you may want to try and join with some SQL server, something like that. You can't do that, all right? Some of the good stuff here, they have an amazing, absolutely amazing product team. Obviously, I've gotten all of this information from the product team, worked directly with them. If I had a problem, I told them. One time, I literally said, hey, I've got a problem here. They literally, within 4 hours, pushed an update out and fixed it. Like literally, in Azure, they pushed an update out, and I was able to use it. The scaling is amazing. Incidentally, if you ever scale from like DW 100 to DW 6000, or I think it's 60,000 or something like that, it's supposed to do it within 1 minute, okay? Be careful, it will disconnect the connections whenever it does it, so be careful as you do it. You just don't want to do it willy-nilly. You want to do it at predetermined times, okay? If there's a problem ever with scaling, contact the product team. They want to address it. They want to know about it. They've told me, tell me. Whenever you can actually hit the pause button and not pay for compute. This is one of the most fabulous things. You're paying for storage, but you won't pay for compute. So just remember when it starts to scale up real big, you're paying huge, huge, huge prices. But the premium storage, it's nothing compared to the compute, all right? Literally within our company, we are literally just bringing it up using Polybase and then shutting it back down. Literally, that's all we do. Of course, up to 4 petabytes. If you want more, talk to the team. I bet you they can actually get you more. All right. Things to do, just remember to do. Scaling should always be under 60 seconds. Make sure and use your plans. Use Polybase, please. It's fabulous, okay? It is not an Azure SQL Server, okay? It is not available, all right? They do have something similar, but it doesn't work anything like Polybase. So if you're ever going to use it for Polybase at least, all right? Try and use you do have to specify a hash key. Had we actually gone through the code more, I would have talked a little bit more about, there's other ways to do hashing. So there's some really cool things. Get a good blob storage tool. It's essential to anything that you do because with Polybase, you're going to be importing data a lot. You can even export data through Polybase as well, all right? So I personally recommend, and I do not get any sponsorship or anything, Clumsy Leaf, it's one of the best tools that I've used. It's actually multi-platform now. You can use it with AWS, Box, other things like that. AZ Copy is free. Recreate your statistics. It is extremely important to occasionally recreate your statistics. They did make it so you don't have to create them yourselves, thankfully. They used to force you to create the statistics. But if you will recreate your statistics, your query performances will get faster, all right? Lastly, user voice. So if you ever have any information, there is a user voice place that you can go to for recommendations, suggestions that you want to give back to the product team. They do look at those, and they do monitor those, and I can tell you that for sure. With that, that's it. So here's my information. I am the salty Korean. So, but feel free to reach out to me. I do a ton of stuff in Azure. Love Azure, it's great. If you have any questions on Azure, I am an Azure advisor as well, so I have a lot of direct access with the product teams, a lot of private preview stuff that's coming out. But other than that, questions, yes. Anybody have questions? I know, this is such a specialty item, yes.
Polybase, is that kind of like Athena and AWS?
Unfortunately, I don't know AWS well enough, but yeah, I mean.
Like, I guess follow up, do you have like, is there any way, you said you had to create those, like create table definitions?
Yes.
Is there anything that creates those for you?
That's a great question. So the question was, is there anything that helps create the table definitions? I don't believe so. It would be nice, and to be honest, I'd have to look. I don't think that there is.
I've been using that in AWS, using Athena. It sounds a lot the same because you can query data out of S3, and then they have another service called Glue that will crawl the file.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So somebody, go out there, create something like that. So he's basically saying, is there something that'll help tell what's in the files for the create table for the Polybase? So I'm not aware of one. I think that's a great idea. I'd love to see that, though. That would be awesome. But no, I'm not aware of anything that crawls and creates that. So, any other questions? All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your attention. I appreciate it.